Shalom, family. Welcome back. Shalom Shabbat. Today we are going over criminals, liars, and thieves, part 3. We're going to do part 3 today. Criminals, liars, and thieves, part 3. All right, shalom, family. Y'all come on in. Give everybody a chance to get in, get situated. All right. Oh, thank you for joining. All right, we're going to go over criminals, liars, and thieves. This is part 3. So if you've missed part 1 and part 2, those are up on the YouTube channel. Criminals, Liars, and Thieves, part 1, part 2 on YouTube at kingdom_of_Israel. And then you put in criminals, liars, and thieves. It'll take you right there. You'll get part 1 and part 2. So we're going to jump off and get started with part 3. And what we're doing is we're kind of looking at how the scripture reads, and then we'll look at certain things within life today that's transpiring and how it relates to, criminals, liars, and fame. That's what we're dealing with. Part 1, part 2, part 3. I think I said thieves, but we're talking about criminals, liars, and fame. Okay. And just looking at how the word deals with, that in real time. Out here in life, how we're dealing with the criminals, the liars, and that chase for, fame. So we're going to start off with Isaiah 32 and 6. Isaiah 32 and 6. For the vile person will speak villainy, and his heart will work iniquity. And this is what we're dealing with in the world today, because like I said, nobody wants to consider themselves as vile, right? But if we're not able to comprehend what iniquity is, then how do you gauge, whether you're a good person, or considered a bad person? We don't have any standards, for these things. So here, let's look, let's continue so that we can try to understand, what vile, and or iniquity is, right? So it says, and in his heart will work iniquity to practice hypocrisy. And again, I don't think people wake up and say, I'm going to go out today and be the biggest hypocrite, ever. But because we do not, have standards in place, like we're not living our lives centered around, principles and values, right now. People are making it up as they go along, right? Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for coming into the live. Make sure you share the live as we talk about criminals, liars, and fame, you all. This is part 3. So, to practice hypocrisy and to utter error against the Lord. So how are you uttering, or how would we utter error against the Lord? We would utter error against God, one, by not understanding what's expected. And this goes back to being able to identify what iniquity is. Because we don't really take to define these terms. We leave it to be, loosely expressed, or it's just like a broad term, sin, iniquity, but we don't really understand how it's defined based on how God see it, that we could adjust ourselves to it. A lot of people think God going to adjust to them, right? But, looking at how we'd have to make, the adjustment. Okay. Then it says to make empty the soul of the hungry. Empty is another way of saying to make vain the soul of the hungry. So out here you have people that really want truth and understanding, but this world that we live in, with the criminals and the liars and those that are just hungry for fame, they'll make the soul of someone that is truly striving, for honesty and peace and, righteousness. They will make their soul empty or vain. He says, and he will cause the drink of the thirsty to fail. So again, looking at this world, how it's set up, how it's established, will cause the drink of the thirsty to fail. Like, you're really going to establish yourself, in a right manner. But if you live according to the principles and standards of this world today, then it will cause you to fail. Number 7, it says, the instruments also of the churl are evil. Right? He devised wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words. Now, again, as we're talking about criminals, liars, and fame, and we're looking at how the word of God is still, very expressive to the things that are happening in the world today. Look at what it says. This evil person, this churl, they devise wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words. How many can you think of? How many can you identify with when you look at the scope of politics and policy? Right? This is what makes the word of God a true word, for it to have been around for so long and it's still so relevant to so many intricate parts of our life. Right? So he devised wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words, even when the needy speak right. So here you can have an individual, an average individual, not rich, not with all the pomp and prestige, but they're speaking truth. They're speaking, righteousness. But they do everything within their power to shut that individual down, because the criminals and the liars and those that are striving for the vain fame, they get the reward in this world. And if you're pushing for anything wholesome and righteous, then, you're shunned, or, you get, the smallest of whatever is there and or available. Number 8, it says, but the liberal devise liberal things, and by liberal things shall he stand. And this is how we see it. There are no boundaries out here. Anything and everything a person can think of in their own head, in their own mind, in their own heart, is good and right, then, as the books say, folks have gone about to establish their own righteousness. Don't tell me, what to do. Number 9, it says, rise up. Okay. We're in Isaiah 32 and 9. He says, rise up, ye women that are at ease. Hear my voice, ye careless daughters. Give ear unto my speech. So here, for the women in our society, as we're looking at the criminals, we're looking at the liars, and we're discussing, this concept of vain fame. Our women are under attack. Nobody understands the divine position of how men and women are supposed to interact. These constructs have been blurred. And for that, it's like women compete against, men, are taking advantage of the women, and it fits the world of criminals and liars. They've made this environment so that the most wicked can thrive. But here, the Creator has a plea for the women, as he says, rise up. For the women that are at ease, like everything's good, I'm educated, I got my money, I got my job, everything is nice, in my world, I'm living a good life. But by whose standard? Because if it's by the standard of the world, then your bar is set very, very, very low. He says, give ear unto my speech. Many days and many years shall ye be troubled. And this is what we have for our sisters, our mothers, our women today. Troubled as they fight to survive in a world that is said to be, governed by men, wicked men. Let me say it that way, because it's a difference. And I don't blame you for not trusting men in this day and time because of how wicked men have been. But the holy men of God, have returned, and things must turn around, and that confidence shall be restored. But he says, many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women. What makes a woman careless? When she trusts in all the things centered around society, and she's forgotten her godly position as a woman. For the vintage shall fail, the gathering shall not come. The vintage shall fail. It's like what you're used to for all the ages and generations that the wicked have positioned you to be, that now you're independent and you're, educated. Not that being educated is a bad thing, but it's how, that advantage within mindset is being used to a disadvantage, in all honesty, toward the women. It says that's going to fail because it's a vain substance. It's centered around the education and or the rudiments of the world. That's your substance. That's what you trust in. He says that's going to fail. And the gathering shall not come means you're not going to be prosperous. You're going to perish in vain. He says, tremble, ye women that are at ease. Be troubled, ye careless ones. Strip you. God is making a plea to the women. Introspection. Look into yourself. Correct yourself. Bring yourself to a point of, pristine ability to where you're looking to find your rightful position within the order of God. But he says, if you don't, no problem. Because in that time, you're going to be stripped. He says, and make you bare and gird sackcloth upon your loins. Number 12, he says, They shall lament for the teats, meaning your breasts don't work. And we are in a time, here today as women are having children, and a lot of women have trouble, being able to feed their children. A lot of women don't even want to feed their children. Be troubled. He says, for pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine. So let me read that one again. They shall lament for the teats, for the breast that doesn't work. For the pleasant fields, this is a good environment. For the fruitful vine, this is your children, that are being failed because the woman is not in her right mind or in the right environment. He says, upon the land of my people shall come up thorns and briars. And this is because we refuse to govern ourselves according to our heritage, according to the laws of our Creator, and we're still living under the standards and practices of a foreign nation and or people. And for that reason, we're surrounded in thorns and briars. Some are doing better than others, but still, you're in the thorns and you're in the briars. He says, upon all the houses of joy in the joyous city. Because we're a great people. We're kings and queens and, rulers and inventors. But under the hand of the oppressor, we're not able to thrive in the manner that we should thrive. So the joy in our joyous cities, it has been overshadowed by cries of pain and anguish because we refuse to subject ourselves to the Lord our God and the standards that are sent for us to be in position that we can rule the world in righteousness, that we can have heaven on earth. Number 14, it says, because the palaces shall be forsaken. We're not living as royal and regal anymore, but we remember it. We see images of it and it does something to our soul. It says, the multitude of the city shall be left, meaning we're destroyed. The forts and the towers shall be the dens forever. A joy of a wild ass, a pasture of flocks. Other people are going to enjoy, other nations are going to enjoy what we leave behind. They're going to build off of what we established. We're not going to receive the benefit of it because we're a rebellious people. We will not adhere to the law of the Lord our God. Number 15, he says, until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high. So we're familiar with this because it talks about the Spirit being poured out upon all flesh. And he's saying, we're going to feel this suffering until that day. And a lot of you just don't believe that that day is ever coming. You make jokes about it. And you want to say, oh, y'all been talking about that for over 3,000 years. And you mock God, but God will not be mocked. Because of your ignorance and your instability, and because you trust in the lies of the illusion that you live every day. But he says, until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high. The us is not all the other nations. The us is the children of Israel. The us is the chosen people of God. The us is the one nation that God is bringing back into fruition to rule the world in righteousness. Because right now, that people have been destroyed mentally. But that people will resurrect like the phoenix until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high, and the wilderness be a fruitful field, meaning we're now starting to flourish again, and the fruitful field be counted for a forest. Some people are not going to see it. Some people are not going to, they just won't be able to fathom it. You heard them say you can't see the forest for the trees. Exodus 16:1, as we examine criminals, liars, and fame. Looking at how the word of God still speaks to this world that we're living in today as we determine which rule we'd rather exist in, the rule of the wicked or the rule of the righteous. But today, according to Job, the world is in the hand of the wicked, but we see that world is crashing all around us. We can see it failing. The impact of the collapse is close. Don't get caught under the pressure. Exodus 16:1, because right here, what we're getting ready to look at as we're talking about this wicked world and how, it's coming to its end, and that Spirit is going to be poured, upon his people. A number of you, like I said, you're making jokes, about it. But when the fire is at the heel of your feet, a number of you will be crying, okay, oh my goodness, Lord, forgive me. I understand. Now I'm ready. And you'll be trying to run and be, with those that are finding refuge. But your mindset has not changed one bit. You're just trying to save yourself. So in the scope of being rescued, you're now traveling, with those that, you're now traveling with those that are being protected. But let's look, at this as we go into Exodus 16:1, and we come to understand how these mindsets, were there then, and we're going to revisit these mindsets again as we leave this place, or as this place fall in shambles and people cry, please take me, let me go. I'm sorry. But you can fool people, but you can't fool the Lord. So let's get into it. Let's go and just examine as we look at how the children of Israel dealt with it at one time before, and how you can see we're going to revisit this disposition once again as we talk about criminals, liars, and fame. Exodus 16:1, and they took their journey from Elim, and in the congregation of the children of Israel came, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. And on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt. So, in Egypt, that's where they were enslaved. That's where they were under hard bondage. That's where they were oppressed. Very much similar to how we've been under hard bondage, how we've been oppressed here in America. All right. Number 2, it says, and the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. See, they were enslaved. But now freedom has presented itself. It's not presto change-o. It's a process. But we're not slaves no more. We're free. We're en route to self-determination. And there were those that could have just stayed right there like, nope, I don't want to go. I'm staying right here. But they decided to walk with Moses and Aaron, but they murmured. And this is what I'm saying. They're like, oh no, don't leave me. I want to go. But the mindset hadn't changed. And as they're moving into freedom, they murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, y'all look at this. Would to God we have died in the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. See, they could have just stayed in the land. They didn't even have to come. But they begged, don't leave me. And they came and they're casting doubt. They're like, oh, Lord, we should have just stayed in the land of Egypt and just died right there and have just dealt with anything and everything, right there. Why you bring us out here? This is what we're constantly against, the doubt. Those that do not have any understanding and or faith, but they come along to keep the confusion going. And you need to be able to identify these people. But look at what they say. Would to God we have died in the land, in the hand of the Lord, in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots. And we did eat bread to the full. It's like I was a happy slave. Now you have me out here, on the road of freedom, and we don't know, what we gonna eat or what we gonna do. It's like, at least as a slave, I could feel my belly. But Lord, look at what you done. You done brought us out here to die in this old wilderness. We should have stayed slaves, y'all. These are the people that we'll still have to deal with, but they will be dealt with. He says, for ye have brought us forth into the wilderness to kill us, the whole assembly, with hunger. This is those that have no faith, no understanding. They could have stayed in the land. They didn't have to travel. They could have, just said, no, y'all go ahead. We're going to stay here. But they came along to keep the confusion going and the emotions high. And some of you will feed into the fear, like a number of you, even in this day and time, you feed into the fear. When people are expressing ideas and concepts to bring about, change within your environment. And because it doesn't fit the standard of normacy centered around the rudiments of the world, you're like, no, can't do that. Don't do that, because you're going to mess up what we got going right here. And we get the good crumbs that fall from the table. Let's go to Deuteronomy 8:1. Because I just showed you how, as we're making this transition in thought, we're making this transition, with respect from the world of the wicked into, the world or land of the righteous, you're going to have those that are going to cause dissension all the way. And they could have stayed behind and dealt with it there. But no, they want to come and keep the confusion going, as, you know, that devil will stay in the midst to see who he can separate from the children of God, the weak ones, the weak-minded individuals. Strengthen yourself with the word of the Lord our God. 8:1, Deuteronomy. All the commandments which I have commanded thee this day shall ye observe to do, that ye may live. That's our answer. Sounds so simple. But for a number of us, it's so distant, so difficult. As we look for solutions, that's the one bona fide solution. It comes from on high. But we don't believe it. We don't trust it. Because we've been indoctrinated, we've been educated, we've been taught other things. Knowledge and information and wisdom and you name it. So when it comes to something so simple as this, we don't know how to pivot. A majority of us. To readjust. This sounds foolish when you look at everything that's going on in the world today, to trust, to observe, and do commandments that we may live. What you talking about? I'm living. Look at me. I'm doing good. Got a house, 5 bedrooms. Got the car. In fact, got 3 cars. Got a wife, got a beautiful wife. What you talking about? I'm living. Doing good. All the commandments, Deuteronomy 8:1, all the commandments which I command thee, this day shall ye observe to do, that ye may live, and multiply, and go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers. This just sounds strange to a lot of people. Go where? So many of you are set on this place right here. So many of you are set on the land upon which the oppression, has pushed your spirit down so far you can't think, you can't see anything else. Like, you can't see the wilderness. You can't see how it's going to flourish. You can't see. It just looks, like a dense forest, like, I'm not going in there. But if we stick to his commandments, he says we'll multiply and we'll possess the land that he promised to our fathers. See, I want whatever the Creator has said belongs to me or to us. Because this place right here is going to go through something very unimaginable. And I say, for all of you that feel like there's no place to go and this is our land, well, like I said, when it come time to go, you just stay right here. Don't come. Don't bring that confusion along with you. You just stay right here and you deal with it as it come to this land right here. But according to the prophecy, it's unimaginable. But he's expressing how devastating it's going to be. But for his elect, for his chosen, for his people, they'll be hid during that time. They'll find a place of refuge. The land will flourish Why? Because we'll live according to the rules, the standards, the customs, the traditions, the laws, our heritage. That's our problem, you all. We've abandoned our natural way of living. We're living under the guise of other nations and peoples and traditions and customs, and we're just not understanding why it's so difficult for us. This is not our way of life. It was handed to us as we were born in the belly of the beast. Number 2, he says, and thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee 40 years in the wilderness. He said, we're going to remember this. He led us 40 years in the wilderness. And some of you are like, I want to go into no wilderness. And I don't know what you're talking about. Like, y'all trying to be millionaires and billionaires. Like, man, this is the best ever. But that 40 years, you think about it, that provides an opportunity for a shift in mindset, because the older ones are going to pass on with that nonsense. And as the children are being born, they're able to be raised up within a different environment, within a different thought process. That's the point of the 40 years, to where you can weed out, the chaff, and you have a chance to develop the wheat, strong and wholesome. But he says, and thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness to humble thee. Y'all know we need to be humble. To humble thee. And here's the key part, to prove thee. And this is what I'm saying. All that murmuring, all that doubt, you ain't going to make it. Because when it go to proving, that's when you're going to get cut. You ain't going to make the team. So whether you stayed, in the land of your oppression, or whether you came along to keep the confusion, you're still going to meet your end. You're not going to make it. You just prolonged the inevitable by coming along and pulling those, that were not of a strong mind. You just exposed them, as well, to where when it comes time to be proved, you're not going to make it. He says to know what was in thy heart. This is what we're talking about. You're going to be tested. So you may come along because you feel like, I got away from that one. But if your mind and your heart is not set on understanding what the rule and the law of the Creator is, you're going to be figured out. And you're not going to make it. You can fool people, but you will not be able to fool the Creator in this instance. To know what was in thy heart, whether thou would keep his commandments or no. This is what we're talking about. That's what it's all going to boil down to. Are you a person that wants to live within the world with the criminals, the liars, and those that are striving for this vain fame? Or are you willing to uphold a world in righteousness and come to understand the way of the Creator based on his commandments and his rules and his laws? And what's so interesting is we're transitioning from one sense of government into another sense of government, always being impacted by rules and standards and principles. We can obviously see within the world of the wicked, the rules and the laws, and they don't work. In fact, they're biased and set for, excuse me. They're biased and, set for, the wealthy and respective persons. But some of y'all, you love it because you can get, different crumbs that fall from the table. As I say, we're in a society of, crumb snatchers. Just sitting at the master's table waiting for the crumbs to fall so you can say you eating good. But the aim is to see who will keep the commandments or not. What's in your heart? And if it's in your heart to be rebellious, you're not going to make the cut. Number 3, he says, and he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger. This was the 40 years in the wilderness. As we're going to repeat this process, I'm expressing to you all. We're preparing to go through this as we're witnessing the impact of a collapse. The world around us is imploding in real time. And it's like you all, a number of you, don't recognize it. You think it's going to sustain itself. It's happening in slow motion, but it's happening. He said, and suffered thee to hunger, and fed thee with manna. I'm going to show you something with this right here. Because we're so used to filling our bellies and feeling as if that's satisfied. But in the hand of the Lord, that 40 years, being humbled and suffering us to hunger, he fed us. But he fed us with manna. We don't even know what that is, but we talk about it. But I want to give you an understanding as to what this is. Because a lot of us, we can only fathom putting something in our mouth as a sense of substance. But though we hungered, he fed us with manna. This was like fasting, but yet being full and being satisfied, not weak. He fed us with manna. Although we didn't eat, he fed us with manna. Then he says, and fed thee with manna, which thou know not. That's what I'm explaining to you. We were in a position of fasting, but yet we were full. That 40 years that he cared for us. Neither did thy fathers know. Couldn't understand how the Lord was doing this as we were traveling. And we didn't have to worry about the flesh pots. And we didn't have to worry about stopping for a campfire and, foraging. He fed us with manna. And this is going to happen again. But a lot of y'all, a number of you, this sounds ridiculous. He said, neither did thy fathers know. But look at why he did it. That he might make thee, that he might make thee know that man do not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceed out of the mouth of the Lord do man live. I hope y'all were able to catch that. He fed us with manna, that we can understand we don't live by bread alone, that there's another substance that when we're living according to the word of the Most High, that we can be fulfilled, that we'll have a filling sense within our soul, within our belly, within our being. In fact, it helps us to vibrate on a totally different level, a higher level. We always talk about vibrations and higher levels, and we go back to dealing with some mundane philosophy and vain deceit. But this is it. He just told you. He suffered us to hunger, but fed us with manna, and we were full, couldn't understand it. And it was an example to show us that we don't live by bread alone, but every word that the Lord have expressed, if we do it, we'll live. Look at what he said. Number 4, thy raiment, wax not old upon thee. I'm gonna show y'all something with this. Thy raiment wax not old upon thee, neither did thy foot swell these 40 years. So that 40 years, that was like a shadow of things, that were to come, looking at how things are going to transpire on the shift or the second time around. But let me show you this. So we weren't eating. He fed us with manna. Our clothes were not decaying. Our feet were not swelling. We were in perfect condition within that travel, within that walk for 40 years. That, you all, is an example of immortality. Perfect health and or condition. In that position, no weapon formed against thee shall prosper. You can't do anything to us in that position. Impenetrable. That was a mirror to what it's going to look like this time around as we're positioning ourselves for the takeover, where the world shall be ruled in righteousness. He just showed us just an example of what it would look like. Number 5, he says, thou shalt also consider in thine heart that as a man chastise his son, so the Lord thy God chastise thee. And this is a problem a lot of us have because, we're like, God, why would God do this? And, God this and God that. But we are a rebellious people. And we don't feel like, we deserve any judgment. Like, I ain't do no wrong. But the Lord is chastising us. This oppression and, this anguish and affliction and everything that we're going through, it's because of our disobedience. And we don't understand just yet. The simple correction is turning back to understanding what are the standards of God? What are the conditions that we can apply these things to our lives? Because the world have us fully distracted. In this conversation, it just doesn't make sense to a number of people because they're out trying to get some money. That's the main thing for them, get some money to keep surviving, not looking at how to prepare for what's coming and coming quickly, but in slow motion. He says, number 6, therefore, thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God to walk in his ways and to fear him. Some of y'all say, I don't want to serve no God that I got to fear. But y'all walk around here and fear these people, or you say, I don't fear nobody, but stop lying to yourself. But let's look at how healthy this fear is and how it should be seen more as to respect. Because none of us, we're not terrified of our parents, but we knew that if they said something, there was a degree of respect that we had for what they said. And if we did not honor what they say, then we had to deal with the punishment. And this is the relationship that we have with the Creator, but we don't want to deal with the punishment. It's like, no, just let me do what I want to do. What parent would do that and say they're raising a respectable child? We just can't see ourselves in that position as it pertains to the Lord our God, because we've been so off the hook since birth. We don't know nothing else. He says, therefore, thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways and to fear him. Meaning, we look at how the world has established things and the way to do and go. And then you look at what God has expressed and or established. You better fear God more than you fear man and his world and his establishment and his rules and his judgment and what he's going to do, because that's where a number of us are in our mind. We fear men more than we fear the word of the Lord our God, the way of the Lord our God. Number 7, he says, for the Lord thy God bring thee into a good land. It's like, y'all want to get up out of this? Nobody else is going to be able to assist us as you all have convinced yourself that you can do it yourself. King couldn't do it. Garvey, X, Drew Ali, none of the so-called great men couldn't do it. No man in that sense is going to be able to do it, because in the writing, God said he's not going to have it to where any man can boast to say, look at what I did. I brought y'all up out of this. It's going to be so that we'll know that God is real. And for all these years that seem like an eternity through the ages and generations, because our lifetime is so short. We think 2,000 years is a long time. That's a grain of sand, a fraction to a grain of sand, even in the scope of eternity. But for us, we talk strong to that being a long time. So, for the Lord God will bring thee into a good land. But in order to bring us into the good land, we can't come into the good land with the old mindset. I just moved on in my thought to just come back to this part right here. To get to the good land, our mindset, has to be changed. We have to walk in the way that he has presented. And he's going to position us to be successful, just like he positioned us to be oppressed. But that good land, for a number of people, they don't think that's real. And to get into that good land, as I was saying, no man is going to be able to boast. You're not going to be able to do it yourself. And No matter how many banks you build and how much you talk about black economics and getting your money up, that's not going to provide salvation. You're just holding on, to things of vanity, philosophy and vain deceit from that point. Right? But he's going to bring us into a good land, and we will not be able to dispute how this happened. So all the jokes, the mocking of God and talking about sky daddies and all the insane things people say, they're going to be put to shame. But those that have trusted in the word and the way of the Lord God will not be ashamed. But if you allow the stragglers that have come only to murmur and to cast doubt, if you allow them to penetrate your mind, then you're going to receive the reward of the wicked. You're not going to make the cut. For the Lord thy God bring thee into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and depths that spring out of the valleys and hills. We will not have anything to be concerned about. I know this sounds like a fantasy fairy tale for a lot of folks, but this is what we truly hunger and thirst for. But we don't want to put the work in order to achieve it, because we're convinced, centered around the ways of the criminals, the liars, and those that position themselves for fame, that we can follow in their footsteps and get what we want. But what the Lord our God have positioned for us, we can't imagine what it is. And how when he puts us in this position, we won't have a thing to worry about. No one will be able to come and take from us what we've been given by the Lord. And see, this is the second time around, because if you remember the first time when he put our ancestors in the land, they corrupted the land. That was the downfall. As he said, follow these commandments, live according to the standards within this government, you'll flourish, you'll prosper. We threw that in the trash. We liked what everybody was doing around us. We desired other things. That spirit of covetousness. We went against our heritage. And for that, he said, okay, like what I just expressed to you. The Lord chastised us as his children like we chastise our children. And because we went against him, he said, okay, I'm going to take it all from you. And since you admire these other nations that I've positioned you to be over, since you admire them so much, I'm going to let them come in and get up above you. I'm going to let them rule you. I have you in position to rule them, but you're not satisfied with that, then okay. I'm going to leave you to them, and I'm going to let them rule over you. I'm going to let them oppress you. I'm going to let you see what that is like. And we've endured ages and generations of it, and it's now coming to an end, you all, and we're being repositioned to recapture or regain all that we have lost. The entire world was created for us to rule in righteousness. Deuteronomy 28:1. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. Man, This, for a lot of folks, they're murmuring, they're laughing, they're mocking, making jokes. But if you understand who you are as a child of God, and see, everybody's not a child of God, but nobody wants to be the children of the devil. There are only two types of people in this world, the children of God and the children of the devil. If you're a child of God, you must adhere to this instruction that you can be put over all the nations upon the earth. But you got folks saying they're a child of God, but their conduct is that of the children of the devil. So that makes you a child of the devil. But nobody wants to go according to that title. Okay? So even as we see ourselves being positioned to rule the earth in righteousness, y'all know what they do. The other nations that have come in and are now above us and over us, they continue to plot and plan against us. And look at what they do. They reward much evil with good. The more corrupt you can be, the more prosperous you'll stand to be. The more corruption you stay silent to, the more reward and or things will be beneficial and or positioned for you to live another day. They reward you for wickedness in the world of criminals, liars, and those that have convinced themselves to accept the fame. Let's look at Psalms 83 and 3. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people. If you all don't see it, I don't know what you're looking at. This is happening in real time across the world. Across the world, as we see the children of God being oppressed. Across the world. We see who's ruling the world in wickedness, no matter where you go. They have taken crafty counsel against our people and have consulted against our hidden ones. We're the hidden ones because a number of us don't even know, who we are. We're the hidden ones because we're scattered so far and so wide, and in all of these nations, we don't know who we are. We're hidden. All of this is prophetic, but even in being hidden, we're going to be highlighted and or exposed. This is the process that we're going through right now, but they have taken crafty counsel against the people of God because they know the moment the children of God realize who they are and they start to live according to the word of God as commanded to receive the promise, they say, that's the end of our rule. We won't be able to do any mining and digging for diamonds and oils and golds, and we won't have, that privilege. So they have taken crafty counsel against the children of God. Let's look at Jeremiah 30 and 16. And let's understand all of this, the things that are transpiring are happening only because we're rebellious people, a lying children. We will not bring ourselves to hear the law of the Lord our God, that we will put it into our life and live according to that before anything else. Because the rudiments of the world have been positioned for us out of convenience, and that's what we're familiar with. So like a drug. It's addictive and it's hard to get off of it. But we need to wean ourselves off of it if we're going to survive and if we're going to live even more. Because if you rely on the tenets of this world, you've already expired. Jeremiah 30:16. Therefore, all they that devour thee shall be devoured. Uh-oh. That's the part they don't want to talk about in your church. The black church, black church, the white church, the church, the religion, Christianity. We're going to read the word of God, but we ain't going to read this. We ain't going to talk about this. Not this part right here. No. See, they have taken crafty counsel against the children of God and don't think there's going to be any judgment behind what they've done. So they've created this religion of a Christianity to uphold European superiority. A lot of folk don't see it that way. But that's the point of that concept, is to keep them in power and or position. And they're holding my book, my history, my heritage. But they're speaking in a different voice that has nothing to do with what's actually written in that book. But they've persuaded billions of people to run with their narrative. So therefore, it seems like there's some good to it. Evil is always made to be fair seeming. But if you got eyes to see and if you got ears to hear, listen to what God is saying. Those that have taken crafty counsel against his people to prevent them from being in the seat that they were promised to have to rule the world in righteousness, this is what he's saying. Jeremiah 30:16. Therefore, all they that devour thee shall be devoured. So for all that they've done to us in eliminating us, they will be eliminated. He says, and all thine adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity. Uh-oh. You won't hear Christianity talk about that. The black church won't bring that up. They don't speak this truth in the halls of Christianity. Sweep that under the rug. But God said every last one of them, they're going to be devoured. They're going to go into captivity. Why? Because they've taken crafty counsel against his people. They've devoured his people. They've oppressed his people. They've placed his people into captivity, so they're going to be devoured and they're going to be placed in captivity. All we have to do is position ourselves according to the standard and the word that God said that we're supposed to live by. And they do everything in their power to keep you off of that position and that foundation. That's a part of the crafty counsel, even as they've created a religion centered around the Bible, giving it an appearance of righteousness, making some of you have a disdain for the word or the book itself because they've touched it. And because they've touched it, you think all of it is perverted and or wrong. But no. But like that sword that was stuck in that stone, and if you weren't the heir or the king, you couldn't pull that sword out the stone. This is how this word is. It's only for the children of God, the hidden ones. But he says, every one of them shall go into captivity, and they that spoiled thee shall be spoiled. This is what God is saying. Revenge is going to take place, but it's not for me or for you to enact it. It's to look at how God is going to do it so that no man can boast to say he made this happen. Those that have spoiled us, they're going to be spoiled, meaning they're not going to be in the position to rule anymore. As to where we're the tail, we'll be the head. Remember when we were the head and we fell to the tail? So we're coming back from the tail position. We're going back to be the head. He says, in all that prey upon thee, he says, I will give for prey. You won't hear this in the black church as you go out on Sunday. They won't speak to you about the revenge of the Lord God that he's positioning for those that have taken crafty counsel against his people. You ask your pastor about that, he won't say nothing because they're liars. As we're talking about the criminals, the liars, and the fame. Your pastor is a liar because he won't talk to you about the revenge of God and how for those that have taken crafty counsel against God's people, they're going to say, no, everybody's God's people. God loves everybody. They're going to start lying to you. God just said every one of them will go into captivity. They will be devoured. If they spoiled you, they will be spoiled. If you were a prey, he's going to give them to us for a prey. They'll tell you that's not true. Your pastor is a liar. Your church is built around lies. Your religion is not real. Number 17, he says, for I will restore health unto thee. See, he punished us and he's going to restore us. He says, and I will heal thy wounds, saith the Lord, because they called thee an outcast. That's what they say. Y'all God's people. Y'all are outcasts. God left his people. He done picked up another people. God loved everybody. See, they've called his people an outcast. They've taken crafty counsel against his people. They said, God don't love you no more. He loves everybody now because you rejected him. But no, this word reads differently than what they say. He says he's going to restore us to health. He's going to heal our wounds so that for those that took us into captivity, they're going to go into captivity to where we're the tail, we're going to be the head. They called us an outcast, saying, this is Zion, whom no man seek after. Think about this. We've been in this land of our captivity. We've been oppressed for hundreds of years. No other nation has come to speak on our behalf to, say, you know what? We've realized, through all of the trauma, atrocities, it's like, we're going to help reposition you all as a people, as a nation. It's like, hey, to the no. You're going to stay a slave forever. Y'all God's chosen people. If y'all God's chosen people, then get yourself out of this. But God will not be mocked. Because they called us an outcast And then they look at us like this God's people whom no man seek after. Now look at this. Psalms 83:12. Who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God's in possession? Who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession? See, while we're down, they're taking everything that belongs to the children of God. And they don't want to give it up because they living good. So they say, don't go help them. If you help them, you're bringing about our demise. So they've taken for themselves the things of a possession that belong to the children of God. But we see, based on what's written, it is coming to an end. Jeremiah 4:7. The lion is come up from the thicket, and the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. As he said, no man is going to be able to boast and say how he did a particular thing. God is going to prove that he is God, because he said his hand is going to be the hand that gets this done. So although they've taken our possessions and they have crafty counsel against us, Jeremiah the prophet, he says, the lion is coming from the thicket. The destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. And as we're watching the collapse of the world, this is all a part of the prophecy that sets way for the lion, for the destroyer, to come and deal with the Gentiles. The Gentiles are all the other nations outside of God's chosen people. As they've lied and continue to lie within the religion to make it to where you can't distinguish what's what. They say, oh no, God love everybody, the Gentiles and all. And they've created a doctrine around that, conflating what a Gentile is or who the Gentiles are with respect to what God is talking about. Not going to get into that right now like that. But the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. And see, if what they were saying is true about the Gentile this and the Gentile that and God loved that, if what they're saying is true, Jeremiah is a false prophet. Because Jeremiah said the destroyer of the Gentile is on his way. See, you can't be a Gentile and a child of God. God's people are not Gentiles, but they've come in and said, oh no, everybody's, God's people. It's a spiritual God. It's a spiritual Israel. God does not support those things within his writings, but that's the way that they've positioned it so that they can keep European superiority in position and or place. But the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. I'm going to come back to Jeremiah real quick, but I want to go to Romans right fast. Because the destroyer of the Gentile is on his way. Romans 11:25, he says, for I would not, brethren, that ye be ignorant of this mystery, secret, lest ye be wise in your own conceits, which most people are right now today. That blindness in part is happened to Israel. And this is what we're dealing with on a large scale with God's chosen people. Blindness has happened in part to his people. We can't see, we can't understand. We're arguing and bickering and we're going against ourselves. We can't see how God is positioning himself for us to come up out of it. But blindness, in part, has happened to Israel. Because for some of God's chosen people, as we're speaking this truth and showing you how what they have positioned within the religion centered around European superiority, it doesn't jive, it doesn't line up with what's written. You have some that are of God's chosen people that are helping to continue their agenda within a lying religion, within a false heritage, within a false hope. Blindness in part has happened to Israel, God's chosen people. Some of them can't wake up. He says, until the fullness of the Gentile be come in. Now, we just got finished reading in Jeremiah where he said the destroyer of the Gentile is coming. Right here, the blindness in part that has happened to Israel is going to be there until the fullness of the Gentile be come in. That means when all those other nations are destroyed, then those of Israel will then see the blindness will be no more. Once all the Gentiles are destroyed, because we'll know, oh Lord, that was God. That was the hand of God. Ooh, my goodness. But that's when the blindness in part will be over upon the fullness of the Gentiles coming to an end. Until then, yeah, in part, we struggle amongst ourselves. Thank you all for coming into the live. Share the live. Y'all follow me if you feel the need. But blindness in part has happened to Israel. Luke 21 and 24. Because I want you to pay attention to how the destroyer is coming for the Gentiles, the other nations. Luke 21 and 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations. This is the hidden ones. Those that are chosen of God's people, led away captive into all nations. You all, I don't know about you, but I'm still in the land of my captivity. He says, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. See, right now, Jerusalem, that land is full of Gentiles. Even though you have a group of Europeans over there right now parading around, acting as if they are God's people, these are imposters. Because wait a minute. If they're not imposters, then what's expressed here in Luke, this is garbage. It's a lie. And if you leave it up to them, they'll tell you, yeah, that's a lie. But Jerusalem is trodden down by Gentiles. So all the people that's over there right now, those are all Gentile nations. God's people is not there. Until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. That's what we're talking about. Until the destroyer of the Gentiles come and eradicate the Gentiles, they're over there in the land. But they're going to be moved off of the land so that it can flourish as it once flourished. And the rightful heirs to the land and to the throne are going to be repositioned to rule the world in righteousness. The government of the world is going to be established in Jerusalem by the children of God, and the world will then be ruled in righteousness. What's wrong with y'all? Don't you want that? Or do you want to continue within the world of wickedness under the hand of oppression? What's wrong? You can't distinguish where you want to be? So we're talking about the desolation of abomination and the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. The Gentiles will have the land until the return of Christ. And this is their end. But until then, see, from 70 AD, even up until now, all Gentiles are over in that land. And even though you have people over there, imposters positioning, themselves as God's people, they didn't get into that land according to any prophecy structure, any structure of prophecy. They got over there based on the military might of the British Army and the U.S. Army. And this is what God said. No man was going to come after his people, but they had other men and other nations to come after them. See, all of this goes against what's written. Let's go back to Jeremiah 4:7 now. The lion is come up from the thicket, and the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. He is gone forth from his place to make thy land desolate. This is what I'm telling you about this place over here, America, is going to be made desolate. And we're going to be positioned in a better place. And if you can't accept that, if you don't want that, then you'll just have to deal, with that in the face of the Lord himself. He says, and thy cities shall be laid waste without an inhabitant. Some of y'all, see, because the church don't bring this to the awareness of the people for good reason. Because the church is established to uphold European superiority. So they're not going to talk about their downfall in their cathedrals. But desolation is coming. The cities are going to be laid to waste without an inhabitant. One verse in Jeremiah talked about it being so bad, the bodies are going to be from one end of the earth to the other. That's how bad it's going to be. But that sounds too gruesome. Like, let's just stick to happy thoughts. Let's just comfort the people by saying, God love everybody. And, don't worry, about, that right there. When God comes, it's, going to be one big jubilee. And all I'm telling you is their story of jubilee and happiness with God, it doesn't match what's written. And they're telling the story because they're in bed with criminals, liars, and they're okay with their corrupt fame. They're doing it for the money. The concept of spirituality and or religion, it's $1 trillion industry, it's $1 billion industry. And they're cashing in at the expense of your soul. But look at what God said in Jeremiah 30:10. Because we're going to witness all of this devastation. And there's going to be a proving. The chaff and the wheat are going to be separated. The chaff is going to burn and the wheat is going to be put up in the barn. Look at what he says. Jeremiah 30:10. Therefore, fear thou not, O my servant Jacob, saith the Lord. The problem is his servant Jacob hadn't fully come to realize he's Jacob. He's living by Gentile names. Johnson, Washington, William. He's convinced that this is life. Blindness in part has happened to Israel. The destroyer of Gentiles is coming. But God said, fear not, O my servant Jacob, saith the Lord. Neither be dismayed, O Israel. The problem is we haven't recognized who Israel is. In fact, a number of us have a disdain for that because within the religion designed to uphold European superiority, we've been made to feel that that name doesn't belong, to us. Blindness in part has happened to Israel. Israel is the most powerful name in the universe, but it's been hijacked. And for that reason, the children of God, most of them, because blindness in part has happened to Israel, they don't want nothing to do with it. No, I'm not Israel. I'm not an Israelite. Well, then what are you? I don't know what I am, but I'm not an Israelite. I'm African American. I'm black. I'm not Israel, though. I'm a Gentile. I'm Ham. You're under the delusion. Blindness in part has happened to Israel. But he said, neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar. Not the British Army, not the American government. He said he's going to do it so that no one will be able to deny that it was God. He says, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity. Lord, save me. Save me. I know I'm in the land of my captivity. No doubt about it. And thy seed from the land of their captivity. As we've been spread throughout all nations, we're still in the land of our captivity because we're not in our land. We're not home. Some of you want to say, oh, I'm home. I'm good. Okay, well, great for you. That's good for you. You accept that. I don't want this. I'm ready for the destroyer of the Gentiles to come and that I can be put in my land, Jerusalem, that it can flourish again, become an oasis. Because until then, it's going to remain a desert because Gentiles have gobbled up the land. He says, and thy seed from the land of their captivity, and Jacob shall return. Jacob shall return and shall be in rest. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. I want my rest. And it's not going to be in this land of America. He says, and shall be in rest. and be quiet, meaning nobody will be able to infiltrate us. A good part of that is because when we return, it won't be in the terrestrial flesh. When we return, it will be in the celestial flesh, where no weapon formed against us will prosper. We had a vision of that the first time when we were in the wilderness for the 40 years and he fed us with manna and our clothes did not decay and our feet did not swell. That was an example of what's to come. We did not live by bread alone. That was an example of what's to come. He says, and Jacob shall return and shall be in rest and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. You know why? Because they won't be able to hurt us. Celestial flesh is different than terrestrial flesh. But you can't get the celestial flesh if you're not willing to subject yourself to the word of the Lord our God. If you're not willing to obey every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord, if you're going to trust in the adversary and continue to chase after the other nations and the desires and things that they've positioned, you're not going to receive a terrestrial flesh. And again, for a number of you, this is like crazy talk. It's like, how can that man over there with all that gray in his beard be so crazy to think he's going to get a celestial flesh? Well, I'd rather be crazy for God than crazy for the world. I'm done believing the lies and the fantasies. See, I had my awakening to where everything that I had been taught, I realized it was a lie. It was crushing because I thought I knew something at that time as a man. But then to be dealt a blow that everything you've been taught, everything you know is a lie, and that you're now vulnerable and you got to start all over from scratch, that's hard for a man. Number 11, he says, for I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee. Those who don't believe this right here, I mean, they got jokes. Oh, you waiting on somebody to come and save you and blah, blah, blah. And just like the murmurers that traveled with Moses, they are there to discourage the children of God because they are the children of the devil. They may not know it, but their whole intent and or purpose is to distract the children of God, that you do not receive your reward. But the reward you get would be that of the wicked. Now you have to determine, do you want the reward of the righteous or the reward of the wicked? Then he says, I'm going to read this line again so you can see what he's saying with respect to the destroyer coming for the Gentiles and how, don't be dismayed, Jacob, Israel, he's going to save us from afar. He says, for I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee. Look, though I make a full end of all the nations, whether I have scattered thee. So this full end, this just means they will have no more power. They will be no more in control. And even for some of them, they'll have to perish. He says, yet I will not make a full end of thee. But because blindness has happened in part to Israel, some of us, we're going to have to go. In fact, he said 2/3 of us are going to go. He says, but I will correct thee in measure. See, we're all screwed up, but he says he's going to correct us. He's going to show us. He's going to put us back on the right track. So that we can vibrate on that high level as we out here and we talk about the vibrations and raising your energy level. He's going to show us how to do that beyond philosophy and vain deceit. He says, and will not leave thee altogether unpunished, because we went through this thing. Now look, number 12, he says, for thus saith the Lord, thy bruise is incurable. It's like they said, you're an outcast. Ain't nobody coming for you. And it looked like we'll never get out of this. Like we're going to be ruled forever, by these European nations. He says, thy bruise is incurable and thy wound grievous. He said, there is none to plead thy cause, that thou may be bound up. Thou hast no healing medicine. Like I said, we've been going through this for hundreds and hundreds of years. Can't get out of it. Just continued oppression, generation in, generation out. Some of us, through a regeneration process, just don't know it, but born into the oppression once again. Temporary though. Thou hast no healing medicine, he says. All thy lovers have forgotten thee. And they seek thee not. Like, we ain't about to help y'all. You on the bottom. He says, for I have wounded thee with the wound of an enemy. He did this because he said, you prefer them over me? He said, okay. He gave us the wound of an enemy, which is he put them over top of us to oppress us. To him, it's a short time. For us, we look at it and it seemed like an eternity. But let the record show, God did this. But it was for a short time. And if you're paying attention, we're coming into the point of being able to get our reward, to, reap those things that are for us to where we can sit the throne again. That the servant will be out of the seat belonging to the heir. He said he gave us the wound of an enemy. He says, with the chastisement of a cruel one. Reason being because we're stiff-necked, a rebellious people, a lying children who will not hear his word. He says, for the multitude of thine iniquity, because thy sins were increased. It's amazing. We can talk about Sodom and Gomorrah and look at how those iniquities were increased and how that was destroyed. But we can't see that for this world that we live in today. We can't see the Sodom in Egypt, the sins centered around the bondage that we experience, the oppression. That's the one thing, as I've expressed, for us as a people and throughout this oppression. The one thing we can relate to within this experience, we can all talk about our hurt, our pain, our trauma. These are the things that we relate to. But because of the multitude of thy iniquity, because thy sins were increased, did God do this to us? Because he says a wicked people will not stand in representation of me. being a just God, a righteous God. I chose you as my people, and you're going to be righteous, but I'm going to have to burn all this wickedness out of you. And it has taken thousands of years. But in the sea of eternity, that's nothing. But because our lives are so short, set around 100 years, we think that's a long time. It's like our mind can't process these things. And that makes these writings, which have lasted the test of time, sound foolish. Number 15, he says, why cry thou for thine afflictions? Like, you want to live a sinful life and then you want to cry about the affliction. He says, thy sorrow is incurable for the multitude of thine iniquity. As long as you want to stay in a world of sin and in a life of sin, meaning transgress his way, go against him, then your sorrow is going to be incurable. But if you decide you no more want to go against him, then we can be healed. But until then, it's incurable for the multitude of thine iniquity. He said, because thy sins were increased, I have done these things unto thee. Because thy sins, like, we underestimate sin. We really don't know what it is. We don't have anything to process it, to make it real in front of us. We have nothing to show how substantial sin is, how detrimental it is as we talk about rebuilding community. Well, if we don't understand what it means to rebuild a community without sin, we failed. Because if we don't know what it means to live in solidarity against sin, we have failed. Sin is our kryptonite, and they know it. So as I've said, they've positioned the world to where we can get as much sin as we want. How much you want? You know what? We're going to make it free. We're going to make it convenient. Enjoy yourself. Isaiah 47 and 8. Isaiah 47 and 8. So I just read, that for you in Jeremiah, where he said he's going to save us from afar. And he's going to make a full end of all the other nations. He's not going to make a full end of us. He said, but we weren't going to be unpunished. And then he went through showing, how we were punished and we're in this position because of our disobedience, because we don't understand what iniquity is, because we've gone about to establish our own righteousness, because we prefer philosophy and vain deceit over his word. Isaiah 47 and 8. Therefore hear now this. Thou art given to pleasures that dwell carelessly, that say in thy heart, I am, and none else beside me. So here, the Gentile nations, they living good. They are given to their pleasures. Their pleasures, it's a world of sin. Their pleasures is not centered around the word of God. They dwell carelessly and they say in their heart, I am. None else beside me. The I am, I went over that. The I am is the one that caused to be. I will be. That's like saying, I'm the Lord. I'm the ruler. He said, and they say, none else besides me. We're doing this. Isaiah sends a warning because they're living in their pleasure and they've created a world around it. They're living carelessly. Remember Psalms 83 and 12? As they say, I'm the one that caused all of this to be. I did this. They said none else beside me. I'm in control. You do what I say or suffer the consequence. Remember Psalms 83 and 12? Who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession. This is the Gentile who says, I am. Ain't none beside me. They've taken the possessions of God for their own. They're sitting in the seat of the heir. They are the servant, but they are soon to be dethroned. Temporarily, they are enjoying their pleasure. Isaiah 47 and 8. He says, therefore now hear this, thou art given to pleasures. They dwell carelessly that say in thy heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. God says this in number 9. But these two things shall come to thee in a moment, and one day, the loss of children and widowhood. They shall come upon thee in the perfection of the multitude of thy sorceries. Y'all pay attention. We're getting into some real conversation right now as we talk about the criminals, the liars, and this fame. Because now we're going into the elements of how they're doing what they're doing, centered around this world of illusion that so many of us feel like is so real, and we claw for it. He says, they shall come upon thee in the perfection of the multitude of thy sorceries, and for the great abundance of thine enchantments. Pay attention, y'all. These people thrive off of sorcery and enchantments. Y'all know it's true. As we talk about these criminals, these liars, and this fame, this world. Number 10, he says, for thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. That's what this whole conversation is about, being able to distinguish righteousness against wickedness, wickedness against righteousness, being able to determine what's what. Because they thrive in wickedness. He says, for thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none see me. See, this world that's going on right now, a lot of people feel like it's never going to end. They trust in the wickedness and they're saying, it's all good. This is what we do. This is life. You need to make the adjustment. What's wrong with you? He says, thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee. I want to point this out now. Because it said, thy wisdom and thy knowledge have perverted thee. This is where I point out there's a different type of wisdom and knowledge, y'all. You have corrupt wisdom and knowledge, and you have right wisdom and knowledge. But just like we have to distinguish the difference between righteousness and wickedness, we have to distinguish the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Not all wisdom and knowledge is good wisdom and knowledge. Because he said their wisdom and knowledge, their wisdom and their knowledge, it has perverted them. And for everyone that lives according to their wisdom and their knowledge, guess what? You're perverted. No matter how well you can speak it, no matter how well you can show how successful you are from it, you're perverted. In all your wisdom, in all your knowledge, you're perverted. He says, and thou hast said in thine heart, I am. See, when you're living according to their wickedness, you feel like you're good. You really don't need God because everything working for you. I am and none else beside me. Number 11, he says, therefore shall come evil upon thee. Thou shalt not know from whence it rise. And mischief shall fall upon thee. Y'all pay attention because we were talking about the sorcery and the enchantments. Mischief shall fall upon thee. And thou shalt not be able to put it off. And desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know. This is what we say. When the impact of the collapse take place, it's going to be too late for a number of you. Number 12, he says, stand now with thine enchantments. Like you trusted in that wickedness, then perish with it. You refused to discern righteousness and subject yourself and sacrifice to live according to righteousness. He says, stand now with thine enchantments and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherewith thou hast labored from thy youth, y'all. From thy youth, as I told you, we were born in the belly of the beast. We've been doing this ever since we came into this world. We've been trained to associate with enchantments and sorcery. And a lot of us, we just don't know. But we refuse once the truth comes in and says you got to get away from that because you're now so addicted to it. You think that's the only way to live. So God said, well, stand with your enchantments and the multitude of your sorceries as you've been doing this from your youth. But they were born like that. They were born corrupt. We just adapted to it. As I said, we were born in the belly of the beast. As I said, it takes for a man to realize everything they've taught us and told us and everything that we've built as a foundation of life, it's a lie. Then can we come to be rectified and deal with truth. But until then, the wisdom and knowledge that we have in their world, it's perverted, and it will never allow us to rise to our fullness. He says, stand now with thine enchantments and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from thy youth. If so be thou shalt be able to profit. If so, thou shalt, if so be thou mayest prevail. Like you think you winning. He said it ain't gonna happen. 13, he says, thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsel. This is looking at, as he said, they have taken crafty counsel against my people. And every time you turn around, they having some meeting, some secret meeting. some council. They're always meeting with their sorcerers and enchantments. Y'all listen to what God is saying right here. He says, thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. He says, let now the astrologers, the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators, let them stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. Because that's what they do. As they've built this world around sorcery and enchantments and their witchcraft and their astrologers. He said, bring them. He said, now you're going to need them. Because when I come against you, now you're going to need them. And I'm going to show you how much of a fraud you are. 14, he says, behold, thou shalt be as stubble. The fire shall burn them, and they shall not deliver themselves from the fire, and they shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. See, the sorcery and the enchantment and all of the wickedness is going to come to an end, but it lasted for as long as it needed to last, that the Lord can come and prove who he is against who they are, as they've stood in the position to say, I am. We running this. We're in control. There's none else beside us. Do what you will. He said, none shall deliver them from the power of the flame. There shall not be a coal to warm at, nor a fire to sit before. These people will have no comfort, as now this is their world and they're living pleasurably. But you see it coming to an end. You need to make a decision. Are you going to keep going with it mentally? Or are you going to pull yourself up out of it and come to understand what's required, not based on what you think or what you feel and how you want to make it up in your heart that you're a good person, because that's not a standard. God has already provided a standard. Otherwise, he said, keep going with your astrologers and stargazers and the enchanters and all of those that are full of wisdom and knowledge, and do what they say do, or come to understand how God has laid out a position for his people to live. Jeremiah 51:5. And we're coming to the end, you all. Coming to the end. Jeremiah 51:5. Jeremiah 51:5. For Israel have not been forsaken. See, we've gone through a lot, but his people, we're not forsaken. Although it seemed like we are, and folks make fun of us and say, pull yourself up from your bootstraps. And, they have all kind of jokes about God's people because we're on the bottom right now, looking helpless. He says, for Israel have not been forsaken. And you all, this has nothing to do with the imposters out in the Middle East. Those are Gentiles still in the land according to the prophets. Until the destroyer of the Gentiles come, ain't nothing in that land but Gentiles. Those folks have nothing to do with the Lord our God, these writings, his people. They're Gentiles. They're the ones that say, I am. They're the ones that have lived according to their craftiness, their enchantment, their sorceries, their stargazers, their astrologers. All of it is an illusion. It's a grand illusion, but they're not Israel. For Israel have not been forsaken, nor Judah of his God. For the Lord of hosts through their lands was filled, though their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. So we're not forsaken because we've sinned and we went against, our God, and we went against our heritage. This is a lesson for us that's marked in time. It's like we'll always have this to look at, to understand what not to do ever again. Number 6, he says, flee out of the midst of Babylon. Y'all say, oh, Babylon, that's old. Well, metaphorically, he's talking about the other nations, all these other heritages. America, the great, as they're fighting to make America great again, there's no prophecy that speaks towards that. That's philosophy and vain deceit. That's trusting in men. That's going by the wisdom and knowledge of men and the world to think that he's going to make America great again when he says, flee out of the midst of Babylon and deliver every man his soul. Deliver every man his soul. And he tells you, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. So if you want to deliver your soul, you have to understand what he has prescribed in order for you to be protected. Otherwise, you have not yet distinguished the difference between the righteous and the wicked. And you're going to receive the reward of the wicked. Deliver every man his soul, and be not cut off in her iniquity. For this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. You won't hear this conversation in the black church talking about the fall of America, the rise of God's government in place of all things. You won't hear these words come out of your pastor's mouth with confidence and surety. Let's go and think about Revelations 18:4, where he said, come out of her, my people, that you not be partakers of her sins, that you do not receive of her plagues. Jeremiah 51:7. Babylon have a golden cup. Y'all know America is like, this is the land of milk and honey. So strong, so powerful. Hercules, Hercules. Nobody can take down America. She leading the world right now. Babylon have a golden cup. This is what we trust in, because they seem to be favored. But this is all a disguise. This is all temporary. Blindness, in part, has happened to Israel, God's chosen people. I'll say it like this. Blindness, in part, has happened to the chosen people of God, the souls that were there before the foundation of the world. But none are lost, but the son of perdition. Jeremiah 51:7. Babylon have a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine. Therefore, the nations are mad. This is what I'm telling you. As Job said, the world is being controlled by the wicked. The world is in the hand of the unrighteous. And all that have drank from the golden cup, they're mad. Meaning their wisdom and their knowledge, it ain't no good. And here we come in this day and time as the voice of the Lord our God is strong in the land today. A number of you can't hear it. Y'all done drank the Kool-Aid. You can't stop sipping from that cup. It's so shiny, but it's gold though. They even got a platinum cup. It's studded, diamonds and all these jewels, and you can't stop. He says, therefore the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? He says, howl for her. Take the balm for her pain. Try to save her. Get a tourniquet. Make America great again. If so it be, she may be healed. The operative sound, if so it be. God ain't never talked about making America great again or keeping the wicked in position and or place. It's all been temporary. Number 9, he says, we would have healed Babylon. But she is not healed. As he said, if it would be so. He said, we would have healed Babylon, but she's not healed. He says, forsake her and let us go everyone into his own country. This is what I'm telling you. For those that are fighting for this land right here, it's going to be forsaken. They're going to walk away and forget her. Just like when we went to the bottom and we became the tail, we were forgotten. Same thing is going to happen to this place right here because it's so great. It's the one thing that needs to be made an example of to prove who God is. It's like they say, when you come against a crowd of individuals, you got to take out the biggest one. Another example of that would be David and Goliath, how Goliath was so, formidable. But David came and he took out the biggest one. That example was made. Now, the fear was gone. Belief in God restored. These are the examples that we're witnessing with America. America is that Goliath who's about to take a fall. And everyone then is going to leave to go into their own country. Understand this. That's why this place is not going to be inhabitable. But if this is your land and your country and you want to fight for it, then you deal with the residue of it. But it will be nothing for you. In fact, according to what's written, the bodies are going to be from one side to the other. You're positioning yourself to be one of those bodies. He says, for her judgment reach into heaven and is lifted up even to the skies. No different than Sodom and Gomorrah. This is Sodom and Egypt, a land of captivity and wickedness. Coming to the end, y'all. Job 36 and 16. He says, even so, we have removed thee out of the strait into a broad place, where there is no straightness. That's where we are right now. Wickedness. He says, and that which should be set on thy table should be full of fatness. He says, but thou hast fulfilled the judgment of the wicked. Because we don't want discipline. He says, judgment and justice take hold on thee, because there is wrath. Beware, lest he take thee away with his stroke. Blindness in part has happened to Israel. But he said, beware, or you're going to receive the reward of the wicked. And that you'll be taken away by the stroke of his hand. He says, then a great ransom cannot deliver thee. Basically saying, for all that Christ has done, it ain't going to mean nothing, for you. 19, he says, will he esteem thy riches? No, not gold, nor all the forces of strength. Like, they won't be able to come and say, I can pay you. I have riches. I have gold. Look at what I have. None of that will be of any influence. 20, he says, desire not the night. Desire not wickedness. Desire not the night, when people are cut off in their place. All I'm saying is we haven't been able to recognize the difference between sin, iniquity, right? Unrighteousness to what righteousness is, right? We haven't come to discern and realize we are a nation, a holy people, trapped. We're trapped under the authority of another nation. And they've conflated the sense of God and his word by saying, God loves everybody. Don't worry about it. And in that, we remain oppressed. In that, we remain under the rulership of Europeans and keeping European superiority at the forefront of leadership, supporting wickedness. We haven't discerned that we're a nation inside of a nation, or we're a nation, a holy people being controlled under the authority of another nation of people. We want to be in the melting pot, not realizing that's to our own demise. Continuing the wickedness to thrive. But look, as I close out with these last 4 verses in Deuteronomy, because we've talked about the unrighteousness and righteousness and being able to discern the difference between these things, right? Not realizing we're a nation of people. As he said, gather yourselves together, O nation not desired. Who's beside us? Who can you think that's more or less desired? Gather yourselves together, O nation not desired. But look, Deuteronomy 4:5, he says, behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments. So when we're looking to distinguish the difference between the righteous and the unrighteous, we can't make it up in our own head and mind and go to all these other sources. And because remember, wisdom and knowledge, they're different types. There's right wisdom and knowledge and wrong wisdom and knowledge. So here he says, so that we can distinguish the difference and make sense of what's what. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God have commanded me. that ye should do so in the land whether you go to possess it. This is the standard foundation for our heritage. When we go into our land, our nation, this is what governs us as a people. As I said, we haven't discerned yet that we are a nation, a holy people, trapped under the authority of another nation. To get out from under that trap or from under that authority, we have to live according to what God has prescribed for us. And he says, I have taught you statutes and judgments. That when we're in our land, this is how we should govern ourselves. And our problem has been we rejected that to accept the ways of the other nation. So in rejecting it and accepting the ways of the other nation, we're trapped under the authority of another nation and people. The way out, he says in number 6, as it pertains to these statutes and these judgments, he says, keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom. As we've talked about the different wisdoms and understanding and knowledge, you want to distinguish the difference? This is your wisdom. But we don't want this wisdom. We don't want this knowledge. We want what they have trained us to accept and perceive as knowledge, as understanding, as intellect. As, oh boy, you so smart because you got your bachelor's degree. You got your master's degree. He has a doctorate degree. Before, he says, keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations. So while they have their rule and way of living, he says, this is your rule and way of living in the sight of all the other nations. But because we've not realized that we are a people trapped under the authority of another people and or nation, we can't see this. But should we realize to come together, O nation not desired, to keep and do them, these statutes and these judgments, he says, this is our wisdom, our understanding, our knowledge. This is right wisdom. This is righteousness versus wickedness. He says, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Do you see what make us wise and understanding? Yes, it's his knowledge, his law, his rule. That's what makes us wise and understanding. As a people, a holy nation. Last 2 verses, y'all. He says, for what nation is there so great? Nobody. No other nation is as great as us as a people when we maintain his wisdom, his knowledge, his statutes, his judgments. Y'all want to be great? This is what we come to because money, gold, the resources, he already said, those things are not going to make you great. It'll give you a false sense of hope and or satisfaction. But if you want to be on top, and if you want to rule the world and have all the resources and be in control of heaven on earth, he says, this is what will make you a great nation, wise and understanding before all the people on the planet. Number 7, he says, for what nation is there so great who have God so nigh unto them? No other people, no other nation can make this claim. And this is why they've created this religion centered around European superiority, is so that they can say God is close to them too. He now loves everybody. In these writings, God does not make that proclamation. He says all the other nations are going to look at his people, the ones that he chose, the ones that were in captivity, the ones that he rescued, the ones that he pulled out and put into position, and or place. They're going to say, this is a great people. Who have God so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for. Everybody can't call upon him. He doesn't deal with all the other nations. He's never dealt with the nation before he chose the nation of Israel. And you can see that when you're following the genealogy in the book, and it takes you from Adam and it goes all the way down the whole genealogy showing you the sons of God. Then it comes to Abraham, it goes to Isaac, it goes to Jacob. Now he's dealing with a nation of people. But before that, he only dealt with a particular son of God. Now you have the sons of God within a nation, as we would be a royal priesthood, a nation of kings and priests. God has never dealt with any other people, but they've broken their way into it to say now he loves everybody. But that's a trick. That's in their wisdom and their knowledge to maintain European superiority over the world and over everybody else. That's not God's will. That's not God's wish. Number 8, and we are done for the day. Number 8, and what nation is there so great that have statutes and judgments so righteous? So here we are, back to distinguishing what is righteous, because their way and their law, their knowledge and their wisdom is not righteous. But he's telling you, his statutes and his judgments, this is righteous. So if you want to distinguish the difference, like you spend time and invest time and everything else, you're going to have to spend time and invest time in trying to understand and learn what these statutes and judgments are, as the religion and all of its money and all of its favor and all of its persuasion is persistent in telling people, you don't have to worry about those statutes and those judgments. Just forget about it. All you got to do is say you believe in God, and you ain't got to do nothing. He going to come and he going to take care of you, and we all going to be happy. We're going to be happy in heaven, together. God doesn't say that. You're going to need to invest the time in trying to understand what these statutes and judgments are, because that's how you then, within your spirit, as he says, let every man save himself. And we realize the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. That's the thing that you're going to use to correct yourself. And I'll tell you, I used to think I was a good person until I started learning the statutes and judgments. I realized I was corrupt. I was wicked. But it became the measure upon which I correct myself. I live my life by the statutes, the judgments. And as I learn them more and more every day, I correct myself. And you should do the same in order to be righteous, in order to have a righteous standard, in order to live by principles. Otherwise, you're living by the corrupt wisdom and knowledge that they've positioned before us, and you think you're a good person. But to the standard of God, his standards, his statutes, and his judgments, you're wicked. You're living a life centered around iniquity. The beautiful thing about positioning yourself to learn his statutes and his judgments, because we've lived such a long life in wickedness, he's made it to where if you fall down, you can get up, you can repent, and you can keep moving forward. Because his grace is sufficient in this day and time that we can be suffice. It's not saying you're not going to make a mistake, but what it does say is don't go out intentionally to make mistakes. Don't go out intentionally to live against what God has prescribed based on statutes and judgments to where you're like, I ain't thinking about that. I'm going to do this. And so everybody else is doing it, so it's got to be okay. Do not live to intentionally have sin on top of sin or transgress against God, and think it's, it's all right. It don't matter. That would be holding hand with the criminals and the liars and subjecting yourself to a fame that will have no prosperity, no success. A false sense of those things, but not genuinely. He says, what nation is there so great that have statutes and judgments so righteous? This is what we're pointing out. His statutes and judgments, this is righteous. Their statutes and judgments, that's wicked. He says, as all this law, ooh, they hate that word right there. Law. As all this law, they say the law is no more. They have doctrine upon doctrine centered around the law is no more. Judgments and statutes that are so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day. Meaning, it's still here, y'all. You just have to want to govern yourself by it. Above all things else, this will be your wisdom. This will be your knowledge. More importantly, this will be the thing that keeps you in the day of the Lord when the destroyer of the Gentiles return to bring the fullness of the Gentiles in position and place, and the chaff will be separated from the wheat. And the Lord looks to position his people back in their homeland, position his people to be on top of all the other nations and allow the world of wickedness to collapse and recenter, recalibrate the world around righteousness. Not all people and not everybody is positioned, preordained to do these things. But this is the example of a world that the Lord our God has positioned for us to have on record, so we'll know what not to do ever again. But you'll have to ask yourself in this day and time, do you desire a world of righteousness, or would you like to just keep it as it is in all of its degradation and wickedness? In order to come out on top, you all, his judgments, his statutes, that's the righteous law that we should live and do. And in the turn of his revenge on the Lord's day, we'll find refuge. And with that, I say shalom, you all. Enjoy the Sabbath.